Hello, keyboard friends and keyboard family. My name is Simon. This is my in-depth review of the TX EO-87 TKL, which is a rather nice acrylic board. For those of you that don't know, this is made by TX Keyboards, which is a fairly notable Korean maker, though not all of their products are actually made in Korea. Fun fact. The case bottom is a molded acrylic, which was available both in clear, which in my opinion looks pretty cool, and also a frosted variant, which I've got here, which I also like quite a lot. The top is a single piece of aluminum, and this was available in a bunch of different color options. And then in terms of plates, there were quite a deal of decent plate options, though I've got FR4 on this particular unit. Now, the default weight, and if you guys can't see me, weight is an acrylic weight. And the acrylic weight actually managed to bamboozle me into believing it was a brass weight, though it is acrylic. Brass was an option. Finally, this keyboard has a rather standard 8-degree typing angle and another rather standard 22mm front height. Although it seems higher, it's actually quite low. Now, overall, before we get into the whole in-depth review, in terms of my thoughts, do I like this? Yes. Do I think that this is possibly the best sounding and feeling budget TKL? Yeah. How much is it, by the way? This particular unit was $185, and it came with a lot of goodies, which was really, really nice. So if you want to find out why I like it, stay tuned for the full review. And we'll pop right into the case externals. Alrighty, here we are with the case externals. First thing to note is it looks like quite a thick little boy right here, but that is basically an illusion. That illusion is granted by the bulbous sides here and the general curves of the entire board. However, the front height here is 22mm, which is fairly standard for, semi-low profile TKLs. In terms of total weight, the full acrylic version is about 1,400 grams, which is quite heavy for what it is. Again, this is molded acrylic, so it is not CNC'd, though when we look at the internals, you might notice that there are some bits that kind of look like they have been machined, but the majority of the case is molded. Here is the aluminum top case that we talked about previously. And in terms of the anodization quality, if we take a look here, the anodization is quite good. It is very, very good. It's a nice, smooth anodization. Keep in mind that this is like 50 times larger than normal. There's my finger for reference. But it's incredibly clean. You can tell that in the corners, the tolerances of the molded acrylic fitting into the, or the molded acrylic tolerances with the top case isn't spectacular, but in real world use, you'll never be able to tell. Like, it's unnoticeable until you look at it with, like, a big old macro lens. Then you notice that some portions don't fit perfectly. Now, this doesn't affect the sound, this doesn't affect the feel, and in my opinion, it barely even affects the aesthetics, so that's not really an issue. The way that the case fits together is actually quite interesting. So this top bit of aluminum is screwed directly into the bottom, which then sandwiches the plate, which technically makes this a sandwich mount by technicality. Though it's very close in terms of feel and sound to either a top or a bottom mount. So this is a sandwich mount that's been done quite well. There's a lot of stigma around sandwich mount of plates, but I believe this keyboard accomplishes a solid sounding and feeling mount. Now, The whole thing obviously is acrylic. This is meant to diffuse the RGB, which we will take a look at in a second. We've got a big old cutout here, not that big, but relatively big, for a USB-C for the PCB, right there. Now it's not perfectly aligned, that's fairly normal, don't worry about that. As long as the cable can get in there, that's not really an issue. The molding around here looks quite clean. Let's zoom out a little bit. So the molding around here is quite clean, and in general, all of the edges are relatively clean. We've got some engravings. They're not actually engravings, they're part of the mold here, where you've got the TX logo, the plus and the X right there, if you guys can see that. And there's a little hole here that allows you to grab your keyboard. Now, TX did a hole like this for their TX 108, and a lot of people were not big fans of it because of the shape. But I quite like this. I like having the ability to pick up my keyboard because this thing is pretty much flush to the desk. So you can't really pick it up from underneath. You have to use these to pick it up, which is totally fine. It's a relatively light board, and it's A-OK. Let's take a quick look at the bottom. Bottom is fairly simple. There are 8 screw holes right there. And like I said, these mount the case top into the bottom, therefore sandwiching the plate. What is very interesting is when I was looking at this weight originally, considering the heft of the overall keyboard, I had assumed that this was actually brass, and I was very, very careful to not touch it because, you know, you don't want to tarnish your brass, you know, the first day that you get it. Interestingly enough, once I did touch it, I realized this was acrylic. Because it was warm to the touch instead of cool to the touch, which is amazing. This is actually a piece of acrylic that has been made to look like brass. And here, we'll pop it on the macro cam and take a look at it. I'll turn it around for you guys. Look at that. Like, that looks like brass. They put a lot of effort into making this this acrylic basically look exactly like brass. I don't know what kind of coating they've put on this, but it's spectacular. It feels incredibly smooth instead of a more rough texture that you'd expect from brass. And even looking at the screw holes here, like the way the screw taps are done, made me think that this was brass, but it turns out it was not. That's pretty much it for the case externals. Before we get into the internals, I'll show you guys what the RGB looks like. All right, let me turn off the lights. Bam, there we go. There's your lovely RGB. Please forgive my terrible Windows keys. Look at that. We got a nice subtle diffusion. The PCB only has underglow. There is no in-switch LEDs, which is totally fine in my opinion. Let's take a look at the underside. And very interestingly, because the fact that the weight, quote unquote, is acrylic, it means that the LEDs actually shine through the weight, which doesn't matter realistically because you're not staring at the bottom of your keyboard. But the diffusion is quite nice, and I'm a big fan of the diffusion. I'm not a big RGB guy, though this is RGB done decently well. All right, let us pop into the case internals. Now, one thing to note is that the screws used here, first of all, are just generic Phillips head screws, which there's nothing inherently wrong with that, though a lot of people are more comfortable with Torx or hex. One issue I did notice when disassembling the case is that these screw taps on the back side are recessed in really deep, which meant I could only use one of my screwdrivers and I couldn't use the other. that had a slightly wider head. There we go. Now, disassembly of this keyboard is incredibly simple. You just pop the screws off and the top will plop right out, which is very handy. Alrighty. The first thing to note is basically how the case mounting works. There is a small little edge here, which allows the plate to sit comfortably on, and then is screwed into the case top. If we look very, very closely at these ledges, let's see how closely we can look right here. You can, I mean, it might be difficult to see, but if you feel it with your fingers, you can tell that these have been machined. So in addition to the general molded case, it looks like there's a little round of machining, obviously for the drilling, but also for a level cut here. And that looks like it's been CNC'd or routed. It looks quite good. The screw holes are of a decent size, and the beautiful thing is that the screws screw directly into a piece of aluminum on the other side, being the top case, so you don't have to deal with metal onto plastic connections. Right here we can see that the screws for the weight don't protrude all the way through. Again, this is just an acrylic weight, so I assume it's glued or something to the rest of the case. I don't know how the brass weight would handle, but I assume it would handle slightly differently. As for the case, it's fairly simple. This basically looks like a tray mount case. However, it is a sandwich mount case. Keep in mind that there are tray mount cases that have ledges on opposite sides, as well as bottom mount cases, which is why I said that this feels more like a top or bottom mount than a sandwich mount, simply because of the way that the mounting is done. There's very little overlap of the plate and the case bottom. If we look at the case top right here has the little cutout for the USB port. That's nice. That aligns it to a portion of the case bottom right here, if you guys see that, and basically acts as a sort of alignment pillar, more or less. Here we can see the 8 screws that essentially hold the top case down to the bottom. This is a very interesting piece of aluminum because it feels like a keyboard top case, but it's incredibly light because, you know, it's literally only the top. Though the machining on this is quite well done, and we can take a close peek here with our micro vision. So the edges are incredibly clean. The things you want to be watching out for when it comes to finishing is the hard edges like these. Now, these look really shiny because of my bright lights, but in person, they're pretty well done. In general, if you eyeball them and your edges look very white, that means that the edges are too sharp, therefore cannot be finished properly. When I say finished, I mean the hand polish and the anodization phase. From what I can tell, this entire piece has no marks. The quality control of this particular piece is spectacularly done, and honestly, for the price, goddamn, this is probably the nicest feeling and looking piece of aluminum at this price point. Now, in terms of the plate we've got here is a FR4 plate, which is one of the better plate options that was available. You had FR4, I believe, as a standard, and then aluminum, stainless steel, acrylic, and brass as options. I think the FR4 here works well because it deepens the overall case sound, which is necessary when we're talking about a sandwich mount, since a sandwich mount will more generally raise the pitch of a build. So throwing FR4 in here is a very good move, and the fact that it has an acrylic bottom means that the sound is further deepened as well, which gives a nice semi-deep sounding typing experience. The plate itself, as is customary from most TX plates, has what we call Swiss cheese. So this is all just one big hole. In terms of using plate mount switches, if your switches are purely plate mount, so no PCB alignment pins, then Swiss cheese is usually not good because you might have some slight crooked switches. I'm not a big fan of that, though this was built with red silks for a friend of mine. And they seem to do okay. They mount to the PCB just fine. There are no crooked switches, which is quite nice. One thing to note is that the edges of all of the switch cutouts have this very pretty mask on them, this copper mask. And let's see if I can get up close and personal. There we go. There's a cute little copper mask on the edges. It just looks cute. I like it. It doesn't necessarily add anything to the board, but in terms of aesthetics, it means a lot that somebody will go out and get proper finishing touches on something like this, especially at this price point. It means quite a lot. Now here we can see all the holes where the screw will essentially go through and mount to the top piece. As a result, this plate is a little bit larger than you'd expect because it is a sandwich mount plate. So the entirety of the plate makes contact with the entirety of the top case, and then that makes contact with the very small ledge area of the bottom case. Now in terms of the PCB, first things first, we've got USB-C, thank God. It's 2020. I'm very happy that it's USB-C. The port looks fine. Everything looks fine. Taking a look at the PCB, some things I'm not the biggest fan of here. First of all, it uses an ARM controller, which, oops, sorry, I'm still getting used to this brand new camera setup. This uses an ARM controller instead of an ATmega 32 or 32 U4 or U2. Usually that's not a real issue. The only issue that I have with this is this does not support QMK. As a result, this does not support VIA. What this does support is a terrible, terrible software that you need to download onto your computer in order to control the key mapping and the RGB of this board. This is a Korean board, and many people know the stigmatized meme, which is Korean cases are great and Korean PCBs are garbage. This is one of those cases where the PCB itself is fine, but the firmware that they went with is not great. If this PCB had per switch RGB, I would understand going with a third-party software. But the fact that the underglow is simply on the the glow is simply underglow essentially. So all we have is these LEDs here on the bottom of the PCB. QMK handles this fine. PS2AV or bootmapper client handles this fine, and of course VIA handles this fine. So I'm not sure why they went that route. That's something I'd love to see changed in future versions of this board. But otherwise, not terrible. If we take a close look, obviously the switch pins themselves or the switch pads themselves are done in silver, not gold. Gold is slightly more durable, but it's again slightly more expensive. But that's something I would have liked to see. One thing I do love is that there are notations here for particular switches, and this is super handy. Especially if you're testing your board and you've got a dead switch or something, you know exactly where to go, and it also helps you with your alignment for your bottom row. That is very noob friendly, and we all make mistakes, no matter how experienced we are with soldering, and get things wrong. The traces on the PCB are decently done. Nothing strikes me as odd. I don't like the white PCB, although it's one of the cheaper options. Again, the white PCB has the issue where you can see these brown flux marks everywhere that you have to clean. versus if you had a black PCB or a darker PCB, those would be not as obvious. All right, sorry about that. One interesting note here is that there are two LEDs that actually shine through the top, though the top is made out of aluminum, which is quite strange. All the PCBs have this. I assume this is just a standard PCB that they use for the majority of their keyboards. However, this is quite funny because it has no place to shine through, and these are addressable. Besides that, overall, the plate and PCB mounting is quite good. The quality is fine. I mean, I have my nitpicks about this particular PCB. However, at the price point, notably this is $185 for this particular kit, is spectacular. I assume that the little nitpicks I have can be solved for like $1 to $2 a unit max, and I don't know. I feel like it would be far more helpful to offer VIA support, especially to people that are fresher in the hobby and people that want to get in there with a very high quality budget TKL kit. What we'll do is wrap it all up, close it all up, do a little typing test, and you guys can see what it sounds like, and then we'll move on to our summary. All right, I hope you enjoyed that sound test. Now, keep in mind that what we've got in here are completely stock, bone stock, red silk switches, which are pretty high pitched. Now, in general, if you want to get a deeper sounding sound out of this, you want to stick with the FR4 plate. The brass weight might help a little bit, but is not absolutely necessary. And of course, you want to go with a deeper sounding switch. Something with a black housing like a Gateron or a Greetag or a Cherry MX. Alternatively, you can throw some PE stems inside of, I don't know, cream housings or something like that to get a deeper sound. So keep that in mind. This should sound way deeper. The switches just make it sound less deep. Now, let's talk about what I think about this. First of all, the price point is spectacular. Price point makes it the biggest no-brainer buy if you're looking for a budget TKL. And when I say budget, I mean like $200. You get amazing quality for $200. Now, in terms of the cons, you've got some light fitment issues because of the fact that you've got machined pieces that are trying to sit onto molded pieces. That's to be expected. So there might be some variance between units. Again, not a deal breaker. The variance is so small that I'm looking at the board right now and it looks completely fine to me. Another issue is, I mean, it's not necessarily an issue, but this is something that will not be changed, is that it is a sandwich mount. That's how it's designed, and sandwich mounts as a whole tend to sound higher pitched than top or bottom mounts in general. I mean, it's complicated why, but they do. Another con, obviously, is the PCB. For me, the largest con is the PCB. I would have loved to see just a normal PCB that uses QMK or VIA. I hope this will be ported. If it's ported in the future, then problem solved. Aside from that, there's a lot of cool little things that I like. The design aesthetic is very, very unique. The weight is hefty for what it is. This, when you pick it up, feels way heavier than an acrylic board should feel. And I kind of like that. I like a little bit of heft. The design is quite cool. It's super well done. The anodization on the top piece is spectacular. The plate finishing is great, though I would have liked to see a fixed plate instead of a universal plate to reduce the Swiss cheese effect and the crooked switches and all of that. The RGB is kind of cool if you're into that. It's a board with, you know, bright RGB for the gamers and whatnot. The nice thing overall is that, you know, this is a molded board, which means that they can make more and more of these. And at the price point, I think this is spectacular. I hope there are more future runs real soon, and I hope that a lot of people are able to get their hands on them. I will personally be buying one of these. This one belongs to a friend, but I will personally be buying one just like this, possibly with a brass weight, and try to build it with a nice deep sounding switch. And in terms of the typing feel and the typing sound, I'm a pretty big fan of this. Do I think that this is the best TKL under $200? Yeah, 100%. Do I think that they should raise the price? No. But I think if they make some very subtle improvements, they can raise the price $5. And as long as TX sticks with it and they commit to making a nice acrylic budget board and they do multiple runs of this, I think this is going to be one of the most successful TKLs ever. Normally I'd say I was pleasantly surprised, but the moment at which I saw this, I was just like, wow, $200 for this? That's amazing. Like, I know it's acrylic, but you know, molds are pretty expensive to make and maintain and then refresh. So I understand that. And yeah, sure, I assume there's a little bit of margin on these, but that's totally fine. You're getting a very, very good product. Now, one last thing. It comes in one of these. Look at that. It comes in a freaking hard case. So I think every custom keyboard should come with a hard case. It costs nothing from the manufacturer side. Well, like compared to if you were going to buy one as a consumer, buying a large MOQ or a large order quantity makes a huge difference and drops the price of these cases so much. So it comes with one of these microfiber thingies that you can use to cover it up. When you originally get it, the plate and the PCB and all the good stuff is here. They even give you a USB-C cable, just in case you don't have a USB-C cable. And I think that's spectacular. The quality of the case is fine. You know, it's nothing magical, but it's definitely going to protect your keyboard. It's great for storage. It's great for transportation, especially with acrylics. Acrylic is soft, which means any dings are going to be permanent. Any scratches are going to be permanent. So you want to take good care of this. But once you go ahead and you just plop it into the case, look at that. That's pretty cool. So, final judgment, definitely buy this keyboard. If you like TKL, buy this keyboard. If you don't like TKL, well, that's fine. But buy this keyboard anyway. I hope there's going to be way more runs. I hope TX runs this a lot more. And I hope that they can keep the price as low as they did for the first round. I don't want to see the thing that I see very often in the community where subsequent rounds are just more expensive because the retailers or manufacturers realize that they could just charge more money and people are willing to pay that. I think that $185 for this current configuration, or $250 at maximum, so that's with a brass weight and a brass plate, $250 is my cap. So if you're able to get one of these, if you're able to get a you're able to get a to get an 87 for under 250 or equal to 250, then it's a strong recommendation for me. The value is good. The value is incredibly good for what you get. If you find it for more than 250, it's probably not worth it. You're probably better off just waiting and getting something down the line. But anyway, that is my entire review. Buy the keyboard. Give Simon a thumb. Maybe sub if you like the channel. We do lots of keyboard stuff, and I'll see you guys on the next one. My name is Simon. God damn it, let's do it again. Sound, you'd want to go with a black housing like a Cherry or a Gateron, or something deep sounding. God fucking damn it! Variant with the clear no. God fucking damn it! Fuck.